John Albert Armstrong. I'm from Phoenix now, but my first half of my life, nearly, was in Montana. I was born and raised in Laurel, Montana. On the outside, the west side, there was nothing between me and the mountains, me and the hills. It was a wonderful childhood. When I was playing probably Babe Ruth ball, and my mother would volunteer to drive several of us players to Roundup. And rolling into Roundup, I think my mother pointed out this strange menagerie of figures on the side of the road. And I can remember just being glued to the window of the car, looking at this group of figures. And Lee and Lee Steen were sitting out front. And whenever we went to Roundup, they seemed to be sitting out front. And so I was young when I saw them, but they've never escaped my mind. Lee and Dee were twins, and they're born probably 1898. They moved to Montana from Kentucky. Now Lee made the figures, and he told me that later, that he loved the guys that he made, and they were all part of his family, really. If you saw Lee and Dee together, they looked like maybe they had been on the street for years, disheveled, unkempt, kind of outcasts of society. My mother never said, don't go near them, but we were always kind of, you don't really go near these people, you don't know about them, they seem strange enough making these figures. And so I was intimidated for years to get to know them. And it was only in accepting the directorship at the Yellowstone Art Center that I sat with my feet on the desk for a week and said, well, now that I have this position, I'd always loved exhibitions, but what else do you do? You're the director of an art center now, John. What do you do? And after about a week, it hit on me. I can do something with Lee Steen. I hadn't thought about him since undergraduate school, and that was kind of in passing when I discussed him with Jim Todd, but Jim reinforced my feelings about him. And it's pretty obvious that people in Montana know from what Todd's written that it was important to him. And so I thought, I remembered that. Yeah, this is legitimate. I should do something with Lee. So it was a while after that that I had a young intern, Shelley Dow, who volunteered to venture out to Roundup with me. And I was happy to take her because I know how old guys like young ladies around them, and that would be an icebreaker. And so we went out there, and sure enough, Lee was very happy to converse with Shelley. He probably would have talked to me too, but he had a grin on his face the whole time. So that's how I met him, and I was really taken by him and the closeness to the figures and the stories he had to tell me about different ones, and his sense of morality really about even partying with them, certain ones, and his respect for the law. A lot of those kinds of things came out in a very short conversation. Lee told me that upon my request as to why, he says, well, I just make these cowboys for the fellas coming down the road. Maybe they'll stop and buy one for $5 or $10. And he pointed at one really tall figure, much like in the background, and said, I sold that guy 3 times for $15, but they never came to pick him up. One of the really important things that drew me to him was the fact that he really wasn't concerned about whether he sold them or not. In fact, I picked up 7 and paid him $15, which was $3 more than he wanted. And so I knew it wasn't for value that he was making these. And I didn't ask him if I could do an exhibition because I knew he didn't really understand what an art museum or art center or an exhibition was about. But I thought, well, if I buy enough, I can have an exhibition. And so, loaded those up. There were some I wanted to buy. He wouldn't separate them. I said, I want to buy this fellow over here. No, can't sell him. Well, why? It's just one of the figures. And he said, he's having a quarrel with this guy over here. Until they get it right, I'm not separating them. And so I knew then there was this relationship that he felt toward them, but he felt they felt toward each other. And it was heartfelt. He took us back, and here's this figure. He's probably 7 feet tall. Had a 5-gallon tar lid on top of it, and with a MJB coffee can top head. And he had bark around his face, not a regular face, but the bark implied beard and rough skin. And cottonwood trees grow like this, and then the next one grows like that and that. Well, this one had 3 appendages, and one made him very masculine. And I started howling. I couldn't believe it. And I said, Lee, I've got to buy that guy. And he says, no, I can't sell that guy. I said, why? He says, you'll take it home. First thing you'll do is put it in front of your house, and the sheriff will come and arrest you. If anyone's gonna get arrested, it's gonna be me. He said, now, how did God know to grow that? But I put the head on him. He was just a real outsider. He didn't fit in society, but it didn't seem to bother him that he didn't, because I think he was very confident in his own moral ground. And there was no hypocrisy about him. It just seemed to be very sincere, and this is what I do for life, and these are my family members. And it wasn't until then that when I went back and Lee was no longer there, I got very, very concerned, because Lee was always there. Being concerned, I said, who cares? They're going to put a bulldozer to this, because I know you're never a hero in your hometown. And I know that the people that saw this every day, it's probably like a mountain with snow on it. It's beautiful the first time you see it, but you see it every day, it becomes common. And his became common to the people around him, and a little trashy. So let's get rid of it. Let's clean Roundup up. So I just was really fearful of what the outcome would be if this wasn't preserved. So I said to myself, if I pile things up in the front yard, somebody driving by will care, and they will stop, and they will have information that I don't have. And so I started piling them up. And sooner than later, a fella from across the street came over and, what are you doing? And I told him, I tried to explain, I'm the director of Yellowstone Art Center. I think that would impress him. And he grilled me for quite a while. And then he said, well, that sounds like a good idea, but I think you should talk to his brother, Tom. What? Lee has a brother, Tom? Yeah, he lives 4 blocks up the street. He used to be the sheriff, which tells you why he had so many cowboys and so many sheriffs in his family. So I went up knocked on Tom's door, and Hazel answered, his wife, and Tom came to the door. I told him what I was doing. I stood away from the screen, not to be too threatening. In talking with Tom, he asked me who I voted for. We had talked about Vietnam and the rest. And I said, Kennedy. He says, okay, you can come in. He had been on the entourage, Kennedy entourage, in 1960 when he was running for president. He was the selected sheriff from a county. And so, you know, he was a little more worldly in a sense than Lee maybe. But he invited me in. I asked him, well, what happened to Lee? And he said, well, they had to take him away. His daughter is in charge of his life now. His daughter? How could this guy get close enough to a woman to have a daughter? And then I remember, we're not always the same as we are today. And he had a daughter, Sharon Cook, and I got her address. It would have been Tom's niece. And I drove back to Billings. I went back, and as I said earlier, my friend Jim Todd was teaching humanities at the university. So I thought Jim, knowing he's interested, would add credibility to this guy from the other side of the state. So I asked him to go over and see Sharon as soon as he could and talk to her about saving Steen's work. And he did, and she got my letter, and after a period she wrote me back and said, basically whatever seems reasonable is okay to do with my father's work. So I said, okay, you know, what I try to do is promote it. So I got a group of friends, people associated with the center and with me personally, and we got vehicles and we went to Roundup and loaded up every single thing we could that wasn't frozen to the ground. So it wasn't the winter time, but it was a sunny day. And then we took them back to the center, and I stored them up in what used to be the jailhouse exercise room. It was the only place big enough. But unlike this beautiful installation, they were just kind of stacked. And the heads were all put on tabletops. And it was really wondrous, but that's how I met him and how I got it to the museum, or to the center. It feels like my life was worthwhile to know that I collected Lee Steen. And it was quite fearful, actually, when I, at 29, had all of these at the Art Center, and I said, I've done the most important thing that I'll probably ever do in my life in collecting Lee Steen's work and making sure that it was in a place where it could last for a lot longer than it would have out in, you know, his environment. I can tell you for certain that of all the things I've done in art, and I've done a lot of things in the museum world, and exhibitions and printmaking and painting and the rest of it, but Lee Steen is the only one that my family gets behind. And they're excited about all the time. And other people too, once they have the experience of Lee Steen, they're very grateful that I and several of my friends made the effort to go to Roundup, pick them all up, and bring them back to the Yellowstone Art Center. Disappointing maybe was the fact that when I did offer the collection to the Yellowstone Art Center, Donna Forbes, who replaced me as director, mentioned, well, he doesn't have an MFA, and they rejected them. And so it put me in a position, and I further understood what Tom and Sharon Cook, his daughter, and maybe even the people around Roundup had to face. What do you do with them? because I couldn't leave them at the center. And so luckily, my first wife's grandmother had an abandoned chicken coop, and I was able to put them in that chicken coop for a couple years. And fate has a way of folding in on itself. And my experience with teaching at C.M. Russell and knowing Jim Poore, who was on the board here, and having a brother that replaced me at C.M. Russell, those connections brought about the transfer of the chicken coop collection to Paris Gibson Square. And I'm so happy that they're here because they're really appreciated. Lee is a human being, was a human being. Dee was a human being. They all are. We all are. He dedicated his life to making something that certainly made him happy, but as I said earlier, he was hoping the fellows driving down the road would stop and be pleased enough to give him $5 or $10. Those are very important elements in life. I collected them. I can't tell you exactly why I knew or how I knew, but I suspected that it was an important thing to do. Now, they didn't recognize outsider art and didn't even name it until 1972, so I collected these in '73, unbeknownst to me what they were recognizing in London. But it wasn't until 1980 that any international museum gave outsider art any time at all. I think because Lee Steen's figures attract people because they're people we know. When you look at one, you see a certain character. You might not know them precisely, but you've seen them passing them on the street or in the grocery store. You look at the next one, say, I've seen a type like him too. And so you look at one of these figures and the hair goes straight up in the air. Well, if they'd have tried that in 1960, they'd have been making a statement. So, you know, there's this kind of timeless but foreshadowing thing about Lee's work. It isn't only now, but it's in the future. And he's got a psychological sensibility about how he puts a person together. A lot of them are picked because of the nose that's in the tree. A lot are picked because what he interpreted as the mouth in the tree. Sometimes he will add a nose. He never carves a nose, he adds a nose. Sometimes he has to make a mouth, make lips, and he'll do it with any material around, a mustache, a beard or a goatee or a hat or arms. We had one figure that Joan and I wanted to replace an arm that had broken, and he felt the anatomy. Michelangelo and Leonardo certainly drew anatomy. He felt it. We went out into what would be, I guess, a cottonwood forest. We looked all day long and found no arms that would fit. The most important thing about Lee was he was naive. He was more worldly than what you think. In the Steen collection, you will find Charles de Gaulle. Could be no one else. You will find a railroad worker that looks like one of the Chinese that they brought over to do it. Could be no one else. You will find Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes, who could be no one else. And he did it by instinct. He did it by his feelings, his influences were the cowboys of Montana, his brother Tom as a sheriff, I think, the horse and riders. There's a piece over here that's bent over, and he's talking. He's got his head twisted, and it has Ole in its mouth from Olympia beer. And you see a guy, the horse is behind you over here, and he is riding away. A guy's riding away a horse, and he has Ole across his chest from Olympia beer. I know this guy's leaning over and saying, "Hey, Ole." So we had this interplay of characters that is as good as anyone could do. And I have seen faces and expressions that Walt Disney would be hard-pressed to make more so. And he does it with the simplest of means. And it's just the trash we throw out that's added the way he saw it, he felt it, and in a more imaginative way than I can even think of anyone else doing. And yeah, he's a remarkable, remarkable artist.